Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy, across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people our partners or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night, on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command area of responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the President stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the President stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The President authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sir, to your first question, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
After the attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes?
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any of the WC-135s up to check the radioactivity?
Okay, you've been listening there to the U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth speaking, as well as the command of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. Now let's move over to Washington, D.C. and speak with our correspondent there, Fraser Jackson. Fraser, so as we were just listening to that press conference, Pete Hegseth giving us more details about the operation carried out. Also hearing a lot about American military might, targeted operation, Donald Trump seeking peace. What else stood out in his remarks from the press conference?
Well, Pete Hegseth, of course, starting in a very Pete Hegseth fashion, praising Donald Trump, but we got down to the bones of the matter, really, when Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, spoke and told us a bit more about how this operation actually took place. Now, we know that this operation now was officially called Operation Midnight Hammer. It is now the largest B-2 operational strike in history, the second longest B-2 mission ever flown. Now, Chairman Dan Kane said that at roughly midnight local time, the B-2s launched from the US. Now, he also told us that the reports that we had early on Saturday morning of 6 B-2 aircraft launched to the west was indeed a red herring, and that 7 others went east. Almost all of it, that should be noted, means that almost all of the US's B-2 fleet, they only have about 20 or so of these planes in their arsenal, and 13 of them were involved in this operation last night. It says that they flew eastwards with minimal communication, and that was the entire route to the Middle East, which was conducted with minimal communication to keep those stealth tactics alive. Around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine, which is in the middle of CENTCOM's area of operation, launched more than two dozen Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against what they called key surface infrastructure as well at Isfahan nuclear power plant as well. It should be noted that at Isfahan, one of the tunnels there is actually considered harder to hit than part of the Fordo plant, which has become, so well known for being buried underground. But it is still to be determined whether that tunnel, which contains a lot of the precursor materials for uranium, has indeed been struck. It appears that the Tomahawks probably were not strong enough to destroy that entirely, but of course the battle damage assessment is still ongoing. Now, the Dan Kane told us that as the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics as well. He said it included decoys as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. Now, he did say that he was unaware of any shots fired at the B-2 bombers. That it goes against what the Iranians said in the immediate aftermath. They said their air defenses had been engaged, but the U.S. saying they're unaware of any shots fired towards these B-2 bombers. The actual strike time, we learned, was around 2:10 in the morning, local time in Iran, when 2 of those MOPs, those 33,000-pound bunker buster bombs, were dropped on the first of several points of contact at Fordo. In total, more were used than we believed. 14 of these munitions were dropped over 2 sites, and the whole strike was over within 25 minutes, with the Tomahawks that were launched from those ships and vessels hitting last. Ultimately, 75 munitions used in total, with Iran's air defense seemingly not seeing them, at least in the words of the American military here. Now, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, said that initial battle damage assessments indicate all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. And we also got a bit of a sense of how long this has been in the pipeline as well, when Dan Kane said in just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. So Donald Trump clearly has been mulling this over for longer than the week or so that we have been aware of an open conflict between the Israelis and the Iranians. Now, we then got to the Q&A, which quite often in these kind of things is when we actually find out more of the bones of things, when the principles are more kind of off the cuff. Hegseth said that the Iranians were still talking to the Americans and vice versa. He said, I can confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. It should be noted that there was some reporting earlier on Saturday that the Ayatollah, who ultimately calls the shots in Iran, has been hiding in a bunker for the last week or so, away from electronic communication for worry of assassination threats from the Israelis, and that has thwarted peace effort talks as well with the Americans. So it is still possible that those messages are not getting through to the highest levels of the Iranian leadership.
Fraser, thank you. Stay with us. We'll be coming back to you. Now I want to bring in our international affairs editor, Kethevane Gorjestani. Thank you for being on set with us, listening here to that press conference. Again, we heard the Secretary of Defense kind of a little bit of rah-rah, U.S. military, U.S. American might, show of force and a deterrence, but also kind of stressing there that Trump wants to seek peace. This was a targeted operation, not open-ended. Do you think that is the message the Iranians are getting? And what else can you tell us about what Hegseth has been saying?
Well, look, there are 2 things about this operation that Pete Hegseth wanted to underline. One is its success. He used words like the incredible and overwhelming success of the operation. He said that it had devastated the Iranian nuclear program, that Iran's nuclear ambitions had been obliterated. That said, when we got into the detail and what is called the battle damage assessment, that Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said that that was still ongoing, that the initial assessment was that they had actually struck the sites that they wanted to strike, but as far as knowing exactly how much destruction there was, that they were not going to speak of right now because they were still assessing how that had actually happened. So it will take days, maybe weeks, to know exactly how far the destruction has been taken by the Americans. The initial assessment by the IAEA was that this will not stop Iran's nuclear ambitions or nuclear program. So the question is, how successful was this operation? Clearly, there is going to be massive damage, but we will find out probably at some point what the damage actually is. Now, when it comes to what you were saying about the question of now they want peace, that was really the last line of Donald Trump's initial post on Truth Social, which is that now they're turning to peace. They've struck, and that's what we heard from Pete Hegseth, which is that this was a limited operation, that they were going after nuclear sites, not after the Iranian people, not after civilian infrastructure, and that they were now opening the door to peace. When you listen to the Iranian foreign minister who was speaking earlier today from Istanbul, that is not the message, at least in public, that the Iranians are putting out. They said that they will have to respond to that attack by the United States. They said that the U.S. Violated international law, violated the UN Charter, and that Iran's response will be consequential, if you will. The IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, also saying that the United States would come to regret what it had done. And to understand why this threat is significant and why you heard a lot of questions about the sort of protection of the forces in the Middle East, if we can pull up a map of the U.S. military presence in the broader Middle East, there are around 40,000 U.S. troops in the broader region. So a lot of Americans there. You have military bases, actual U.S. military bases in countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, but you also have U.S. military presence, as in they are on other countries' bases. They don't have their own base, but they are present. For example, in Syria, you have about 600 U.S. troops that are operating around the camps that are holding some of the jihadist fighters in Syria. You have U.S. presence in other countries like Oman, like Saudi Arabia, like Jordan. All of those countries are very, very close to Iran. So you could imagine that the Iranians still have possibly some ballistic capabilities. So Iran could strike themselves directly these sites. But also you have to remember that, yes, Iran's proxies have been weakened, but they are still operational. If you talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, they're obviously extremely weakened. But there are still militias operating in Iraq that are still very strong. There are also the Houthis in Yemen who had sort of a truce with the Americans over the past few weeks. They have said that maybe they would respond if Iran was attacked. So this map really gives you an idea of how close Americans are actually to Iran. Iran doesn't need to go strike the Americans on U.S. soil. They also have plenty of U.S. embassies in the regions where there are U.S. citizens that the Iranians could actually target.
Kethevane, thank you so much. We're going to head back to Washington, D.C., back to Fraser for a follow-up question. Donald Trump, he called Iran the bully of the Middle East in remarks earlier, and he warned Tehran that it should make peace or else. So what's the reaction been in Washington, and how much support does the president have in Congress after these strikes?
A significant amount, really. There was some worry in the lead up to this bombing campaign by the Americans that there was going to be a splinter in the Republican support of Donald Trump. And it's true that some of the more right-wing members of the MAGA movement were certainly more vocal against Donald Trump's idea at that time to strike Iran. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the conservative commentators like Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, and Steve Bannon, who of course is a former top advisor to Donald Trump, were all wary of something like this taking place. And that was something which was being echoed in the base as well. Donald Trump spent a lot of his time over the last 15 years railing against American foreign policy decisions, forever wars, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, saying that he was going to be the peace candidate, that Kamala Harris would be the war candidate. And that was a message that resonated with a lot of his with his base, and it seems that he has ultimately kind of gone back on this. There have been some people that I've seen on Twitter who say that they feel betrayed by Donald Trump after these kind of strikes, but I think ultimately the way that things tend to work with Donald Trump and his followers is that they always come around. They always come around to his way of thinking, and whatever he says and whatever he does is ultimately the best way to do and think and say things. So we're likely to see be a crystallization of support around Donald Trump, and that ultimately will be something which was also backed up in Congress. We've seen members of Congress already rallying around Donald Trump, people like Lindsey Graham, who has been a long-time hawk for Israel. He said that the Iranians had it coming. We had messages from Mike Johnson, who said that this should serve as a message to allies and also to adversaries that the Americans mean what they say when they say that they're going to stand by their words. So ultimately, the Republicans on Capitol Hill, for the most part, staying with Donald Trump. There have been a couple of dissenting voices, like I mentioned, Marjorie Taylor Greene, although she has kind of softened her rhetoric in the wake of this bombing campaign from the Americans. We also heard from the representative of Kentucky, Thomas Massey, who co-sponsored a resolution which would try to block any military action in Iran without congressional approval first. He said that this is not constitutional, and that is the line that the Democrats are really picking up and running with today, saying that this needed to be authorized by Congress because it has a potential to escalate into a wider war. But of course, as we heard from Pete Hegseth, this is an isolated strike. They've telegraphed that to the Iranians, that this was a targeted strike on nuclear facilities. They don't anticipate more strikes unless there's a retaliation. So that really was the administration's reasoning for not needing congressional approval for this strike.
Fraser, thank you so much. That's France 24's Fraser Jackson, our correspondent in Washington, D.C.